Welcome to the last few days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
What do you think of this exciting imperialistic election we are facing?
Well, see, to put it the mildest way I know how, and to quote famed comedian Dave Chappelle, we live in the age of spin.
And I don't know about you, but I get motion.
So do I. I hate spinning. It just makes me dizzy. Well, I just want to stop the world and let me off. Well, if you take and you look at the news that's come out about this election, according to the BBC, everything they look for in a third world country for a fixed election and it not being a legitimate election is true in this election here in the United States.
Oh, but the election officials are saying there was no voter fraud.
No, they said there's no widespread voter fraud. They never said there was no voter fraud. They said it wasn't widespread.
But still.
And
the
media, in their infinite wisdom, says there is no evidence of voter fraud. However, in case people are suddenly waning forgetful, the media doesn't determine what evidence is. The way to determine whether or not we have sufficient evidence of voter fraud is to take it to court. And since there has yet to be a sufficient case surrounding voter fraud, of course nothing will be declared as significant evidence. We have to go to court first.
But the election officials, it's almost as if, they're the defendants in these cases.
They are.
So they're obviously trustworthy, right?
We
can rely on what they say.
They have 600 pages of affidavits of criminal corruption.
It's like asking a cat where your pet hamster went. You know where it went. But the cat is of course going to say, there is no evidence that I did this.
That is assuming if you're in Alice in Wonderland. And you can get a straight answer from the cat in the first place.
Oh. They took and posted what the rules that they look for, the different telltale signs that they look for in a corrupt election. One of them is you'll have more than 75% of a region voting.
Because even in Australia, they don't. Because we had a lot of places that were upward of 90%.
Oh, we had some that were over 100%, in excess of 100%.
And even in Australia, where voting is mandatory, you never get that.
The fact that they were taking and reporting all the results at a fairly steady pace, and then all of a sudden Trump starts winning it in the key battleground states, and the gamblers flip the odds to where they start indicating they believe Trump's going to win, and the stock for China plunges, and they stop counting. And suddenly, the next morning, when they were supposed to not start until 8 o'clock in the morning, all these counted votes that were counted at 4 in the morning and proved that Biden was winning without any observers.
which is a violation of chain of custody.
It's also the violation of voter laws in almost every state in the union. In fact, in every state in the union.
Which means
You
they need to throw it out, start over, do it again. Or the legislators need to do their constitutional job and choose the electors for them.
Which has already been
There's also
suggested in
the
many of the places.
fact in Michigan, statisticians have taken what is normal and looked at the outcome and compared it to what is normal, and state that it's a statistical impossibility for that to happen. And these are Democrat statisticians, because according to the major cities and counties with the major cities in Michigan, when the regions that were primarily Democrat voted for Trump. The areas that were primarily a Republican, the more the Republicans voted, the less votes Trump got. In a direct straight line effect, not in a up and down, but literally straight down. So the more Republicans there were in the county, the more they voted, the less votes he got.
That goes beyond screaming of fraud.
According to the mathematicians, they said the only way that can happen is if a computer is looking for certain logarithms that when their conditions are met, they start switching votes from one to another. So it's pointing to the fact that the computers that count the votes in Michigan were actually programmed to make him lose.
So the result, or even if the allegations might be true, what's required is a hand recount. Minimum. It's the only way that it could be fair. And it's the only way that... what's that on your screen, Robert?
That was a fly. Right over the camera.
It's the only way you're not going to get riots. You'll probably get riots anyway, but it's the only way you'll get only one side rioting rather than both sides.
Well, the day after the election, Antifa was trying to burn down Biden's election center in Portland.
And the weird thing is, none of the mainstream media really latched onto this. They all thought that the riots had stopped, but no, they're still. I don't know if they've stopped now, but
Antifa doesn't care if the Democrats win. They don't care if the progressives win. They want communists. They were never on the Democrat side. They were trying to use the Democrats just as the Democrats were trying to use them.
Oh, sure.
They were never allies.
It's like there's a video out that this guy's standing on his front porch talking to Black Lives Matter protesters that are attacking his house. And he's saying, "See, I have a Biden side. That means I'm on your side. Why are you attacking me?" And they basically took and used strong profanities that I will not be repeating and told him that no white man is on their side. They have no allies.
Why is it there are so many white BLM?
Because they are a bunch of communists.
Yeah, but no white man is on their side, but white people are on their. What?
Robert, think of it this way: no Jews were on the Nazi side, except for the ones that were.
We're looking at you, Soros.
Soros and Hitler. You know, the major big players.
When you're taking a look at this particular campaign, so many people have taken, oh, well, he needs to just concede and give up. Others are saying, well, it'll come down to the courts, but the courts won't take and rule in his favor, therefore he doesn't stand a chance. But he needs to go through the process just to prove to the world that it's a fair election. It's not a fair election. And if the courts don't do their job and judge wrong, how does that take and convince people that it's a fair election?
I think he does need to go through the process, though.
Oh, I agree. He needs to go through the process.
But he needs to fight this at every stop.
But see, I honestly believe that it can be forced into a position to where the Congress has to decide who the president is.
Which is constitutional. Completely legal.
This is a long shot, but I think it is possible that both of them declare that they are the president of the United States, and the country is going to start taking sides.
Oh, they both. Well, Biden's already made the declaration.
Yes.
And so has Trump. So that part's already happened.
But when the country's taking sides, that's a...
The country...
It hasn't happened
The
yet.
country is probably going to start taking sides around the time that... oh man, what's the word for...
The inauguration?
Yeah, around the time that the inauguration's getting close.
Well, if it goes to the House and it's voted by state delegation, each state gets one vote. There are 30 Republican states and 20 Democrat states.
Not counting rhinos.
Well, but the rhinos would have to overrule the non-rhinos mixed in.
Fair enough.
And that would be a lot of state delegations turncoat.
So the odds are, if it goes to the House, Trump wins. And he wins according to the Constitution on how it's supposed to be done. But that's when the Democrats will declare that it was that Biden won the election, and they didn't count all the votes. It didn't matter that the votes were illegal votes. They didn't count all the votes, and it didn't matter the fact that they were cheating. So they need to get out of Biden's way.
Well, it's too late. It's already been determined. Not all the votes will count. Because Trump recently won a case in Pennsylvania that threw out some votes. Don't know how many. I haven't found anyone who actually said how many it was. But
well, we know this much. The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered them to take and separate the ballots that came in after 8 o'clock on Election Day. And they were to be kept separate from all the other ballots. Because the election ended at 8 o'clock. So any ballots come in after that don't count.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know for a fact that they had already mixed those ballots in with the regular ballots. They didn't separate them. They'd already counted them. And they were told not to count them.
Which is defying court order. Which could have their whole process thrown out on on process.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very likely that the Supreme Court will throw out Pennsylvania's election on process. Okay, so Pennsylvania's out of the picture. They can't certify any election.
So
they
it goes to their House or Senate.
It would actually they can certify an elector because the state legislator is the one who ultimately
What is the deadline for them to certify their elector?
November 20th, I believe.
November 20th. So there is 7 days before every state has to have their elector.
Well, not every state has the same day to certify their electors.
Yeah, but it's around the same day.
Around yeah.
So in about another week.
In about another week. That's when things are really going to get hot and heavy if you haven't been paying attention. If you have been paying attention, you already think they're pretty hot and heavy. But that's when things are really going to matter.
And thing about it is, as long as there's a court case pending,
they can't certify the elector.
They can't certify the election.
Yeah, and if they miss the deadline, it has to go to their House or Senate.
No.
Of the state.
It can go to the House of the actual.
Well, see, if they're unable to certify the elector because it's the House legislative body. I'm not sure if it's both the House and the Senate. The state. I'm not sure if it's the House and the Senate for the state or just the House for the state. But they're the ones who certify the elector. If the votes are thrown out before the deadline, then they can still certify the elector just based on their own vote. If it is thrown out after the deadline, it may have to go to the federal House of Representatives.
But the federal House of Representatives can't determine which one the individual state is voting for, if just that state.
Yes, they can.
Can they?
Yes. Oh, yes, they can.
Through delegation.
through state delegations in the House.
Okay.
But if one does a state delegation, all of them have to.
Yeah. So if one state can't certify its votes in time, and they cannot certify their votes at all as long as there's a
and just to be clear, these legal battles are happening in all 7 swing states. Every single one of them.
Yes.
Plus some.
So plus some. But only one needs to go through.
Right.
And people say it's a long shot.
Well, you still gotta trust the Republican Party. I gotta say, that's a bit of a long shot.
I don't know, I think the net is spread sufficiently wide enough.
All they have to do is have one of those states tied up in the courts to where they can't certify the election. Preferably more than one.
Now, admittedly, though, in Bush v. Gore, they did have them certify Florida after the deadline.
Well,
yes, they did.
Bush v. Gore is actually probably the exact example we can use, because that is another case where the media all declared a winner and then had to eat their own words when the process finally came through.
But in Bush v. Gore, they allowed Florida to wait until December to certify their election.
And no one on Twitter telling you to cope or is enough to correct the process. Well, is enough to stop the process. It's amazing how much. Who uses
Twitter anymore? Don't you know Parler's the thing?
I don't use either.
By the way, we can be reached on Parler by at SR Farrar on Parler.
This is news to me, but
yeah, ever since Biden was projected the winner, alternative forms of social media have suddenly seen a massive surge in use.
It's almost like people don't trust the media or major internet companies anymore. Strange.
Parler jumped to having the most downloads on the App Store. let's see, Rumble is rising up to compete with YouTube. It's got a long way to go.
And when it comes to Rumble, we are on Rumble at For Our Ministries. And it is the at For Our Ministries.
Speaking of which, I need to finish uploading those things, but I might have to skip episode 5. Just can't get that one to upload. It gets stuck.
And there are a variety of other alternative medias that are rising up to overthrow the old Dominion.
Well, what was the new one that replaces Facebook?
MeWe.
MeWe.
Yes.
That sounds Chinese.
I know it does. It sounds like a Chinese company. I don't think it is, though. Because it's supposed to be a free speech platform, and China and free speech are not a thing.
Then there's also diaspora.
I wonder if is there a statistic for how many people are trying to go back to MySpace?
Does it still exist?
It still exists. They tried to market it toward musicians and creators like that a while back, but it never really got traction. I know it still exists, though.
There may be a move back to MySpace for some people.
It's no longer owned by the same guy who owned it back when it was still big.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd rather MySpace.
Did you just Google it or something?
No.
What was it?
I just remember the old MySpace, and I'm like, nah.
MySpace, the new MySpace and old MySpace, or at least the new MySpace from about like 4 years ago when I actually looked at it to see how much it had changed, was very different. They're not the same thing anymore. Although I did like the fact that you could use basic HTML to edit your own page. Though ironically, I never had my own page. Go figure.
No, your brother did, but you didn't.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder what Matt actually got up to on that site.
I've often thought that MySpace was a center for the left anyway.
All social media was at that time. It was cool to be on the left. Bush was coming to the end of his term. All the young people were freshly brainwashed out of high school and college.
Now, if you're a rebel, if you're on the right, so.
Your mother says I've always been a rebel, but I've always been on the right.
Join the rebellion. Join us.
Could say it's the right thing to do.
The one thing that the Democrats succeeded in accomplishing was by having so much extreme early voting, where people were voting a month before the actual election. A lot of people that later wanted to change their votes couldn't because they'd already voted.
That's why you don't vote for an election. When at the final debate, a week before the election, a candidate says he's going to ban fracking.
And the most common search on Google is, how can I change my vote?
Weirdly enough, Arkansas would top the list on that. I don't know.
Arkansas's a strange place.
But then Pennsylvania was also really high on the list. And I understand that.
Fracking is very important for any oil-based economy. But Trump clearly doesn't believe he's going to lose this, and like you said, the net spread pretty wide. So it looks like that he has a viable chance of winning.
Yeah, especially since that's only one of 3 or 4 different ways he's set up to actually make progress in this.
I want to see the Supreme Court throw out the mail-in votes, so this never happens again. That's what I want.
They can't completely throw out mail-in votes, because mail-in votes are the only way to do absentee voting.
These mass mail-in votes, no proper chain of custody, and so they're just, and really, let's be honest, they're impossible to properly secure.
Yeah, they are.
So I want to see what the shenanigans they pulled this year never happen again.
Well, most of these mail-in votes where they don't require signatures, they don't require verification of who the person is. They're just randomly sending them out to postal addresses. Those are dictates by either politicians or courts, but never went through their legislatures. So they're all illegal. The Supreme Court could throw them all out.
In fact, I don't know why they let Pennsylvania go. Well, no, not. I think it was Michigan go. Because it was Pennsylvania, where the courts unilaterally changed the rules. And then, against the will of the legislator, they need to throw that whole election out.
Yeah. And the thing about it is they have the grounds to throw it out.
If I recall correctly, that particular case has already gone to the federal level and is being argued out there.
But it hasn't made it to the Supreme Court yet.
It has not made it to the Supreme Court yet. Oh, yet. You are correct.
And the thing about it is, if the Supreme Court takes and declares that the courts can't change the rules.
Well, it's not the court's place to change the rules. In fact, it's specifically against the separation of powers for the courts to make rules. It was never their place. They interpret rules that are already in place.
But that's what a lot of these states did. Either the Attorney General or the courts changed the rules, and neither one of them have the authority to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they're not following the rules of their state for the election's void.
Yeah.
Which would throw it to the state houses. Unless they could take and rapidly do a revote.
There is a reason why the Constitution puts the authority in the legislature, not in the hands of the judiciary.
Yeah.
That's because the judiciary is rarely elected by the people. It doesn't have the same checks and balances. It's much harder to get rid of a judiciary. It's
significantly more difficult.
Now, Trump's so certain that he went through and fired the leaders of the chief of staff in the Pentagon and replaced them.
Which it's about time. You should have done that a long time.
Should have done that a really long time ago.
But
he should have fired Mark Esper as soon as he made his comments about the Insurrection Act.
The thing is that when he took and went through and did that, the news started screaming that he threw them out and replaced them with his own people. Well, of course he replaced.
Who else would he replace them with?
Now remember that Obama, as soon as he got into office, fired almost every.
And replaced them with his own people.
Here's an interesting thing that they actually have brought up, which is a surprising thing from the media. Those wayward souls that were just kicked out were being immediately picked up by Biden and his group when building their cabinet. And what they have decided to call themselves the Office of the President-elect. And he's actually already starting the process for trying to take over, including calling foreign powers and trying to get their backings behind him. preemptive to the confirmation, which should be in about 7 days.
If he doesn't take and get the confirmation, he is not the president-elect.
Yeah.
And any country that backs him is declaring war on the United States.
Yeah. It's the exact same reason why England and France never backed the Confederacy when they were actually reaching out to try to get some backing.
So, Taiwan may have already congratulated Biden.
Well, there's a lot of states that have and countries that congratulated him, but
there's a big difference between congratulating him for what it appears currently and backing him.
True.
Very big difference.
Though
one is leaning toward their side, but is still relatively neutral, and the other is directly, I will support you if it comes to a civil war thing.
But knowing President Trump, he tends to back people who back him. Taiwan, basically shuffling all of their cards into one pile.
No, they're not. Because after all, they're working with Trump, or else Trump wouldn't have sent the Marines over there to teach them how to fight the Chinese off when they're invaded.
Note he said when and not if.
Also, the amount of information of what's actually going on in the United States is limited to people in other countries, myself included. They don't see everything that's going on behind the smoke and mirrors of the media. If it wasn't for the fact that I have an invested interest and have to dig a little deeper than most, even I would think that Biden had won.
And he might in the end.
He might. He very well might. It's just too early to say.
But, yeah, you're right. It's too early to say. And even the leftists in Europe are taking and saying that the vote's fraudulent.
Yeah.
So, when Obama won second term, there was a lot of talk of secession.
There was a whole lot of talk of secession.
Yeah, they even had a petition
well.
for it. They got a lot of votes. Well, a lot of signatures.
If I recall correctly, there were a lot of states that had enough signatures to secede. If it wasn't for the things that happened after the Civil War that were specifically put in place to block secession, the country would have split right then and there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that's not on people's lips as much anymore. Now it's just revolution. People aren't as interested in getting their states to leave the Union. They want to keep the Union and overthrow this fraudulent election. The victor of this election, whomever
it may be.
Well, the Democrats have been talking secession of the West Coast if Biden doesn't get it.
Let him go.
See, the issue with secession, though, is once you secede, you have to protect your land. If you don't secede, it's not as big of a deal. If you don't control the territory, then you don't necessarily have to defend the territory.
If the West Coast was to secede, actually allowed to succeed, whether or not that happens or not is irrelevant. If it was, they would be bankrupt within a year.
Less
than that.
Yeah. Now, I know that a lot of people are saying, go online and their little keyboard warriors and say, California is responsible for 30% of
the gross national product
of the United States gross national product, which actually isn't really true, because they are in the negative. They consume more than they provide.
Actually, you know what's really interesting? So they put out the economic news, and the U.S. has had its best economic year in history in the year with coronavirus. That means California locked down, Illinois locked down, Northeast locked down, the majority of the country locked down. Basically, our hands not just tied behind our back, but the U.S. completely hog-tied and still had its best year on record. I think we can go without California. I think we'll be fine.
I think we should let him go. Let him go.
I've argued that for years.
Give people that want to be part of the states open rights to migrate from the new California Republic, if you will, and
see, I don't like that because that kind of rips off the rural Californians who don't want to be part of the new California.
No. That's exactly why I said to give them right to come into the states, to give them the right to make their choice.
Don't give them California. Give them just the coast of California.
I think what they ought to do is say, okay, you want to secede. Fine. Each county decides whether they will secede. If the county votes to remain, that county remains in the United States. If that county votes to secede, it's gone.
And it will start looking very reminiscent of the zoomed-in maps of each of the voting of the United States.
Very, very rapidly, yes.
Which, sorry to break it to those city slickers, but they don't hold most of the land.
No. And think about it, once you do that, then just build a wall around it.
And make them pay for it.
Actually, I remember hearing the reasoning on how Mexico was paying for it.
Oh yeah, Trump's explained how they're paying for it. They're paying a fee to enter the country.
Yeah.
For when they visit.
Genius.
But so when you take and you look at you put a wall around them, and now you've got those B movies from the 80s, Escape from New York, Escape from LA.
Oh my. I in fact had a detailed conversation earlier today about The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers and other such movies in that genre. Interesting discussion.
Which The Thing? The
yes.
50s one or the 80s?
Yes.
Or the 2000s?
Yes.
You did all three of them. Wow.
Yeah. We discussed all of them.
The 80s and the 2000 ones have the one from the 50s beat hands down.
But the one for the 50s, I think, was an important landmark. Way ahead of its time.
The one from the 50s was very accurate until it wasn't.
Oh, you know who played the Thing in the 50s, The Thing?
Guy in a rubber suit.
Ah, a specific guy in a rubber suit. You know the guy that played Matt Dillon? James Arness? He was the Thing.
He was in the 80s one, wasn't he?
No.
Oh.
He was in the 50s one.
Then I don't know who that really is.
The 80s one didn't have a person as the monster.
Yeah. I need something else to cross-reference here so I can...
It had
Kurt Russell, I think.
Kurt Russell in it.
But the guy from the 50s, if I don't have something else he was in, his name is meaningless to me.
Gunsmoke.
Oh,
Matt Dillon.
Gunsmoke. Got it.
Matt Dillon. That was the thing. That's where he got his start.
Okay.
Just walking around in an Arctic area killing people.
And that's like telling me that one of the main actors in Lonesome Dove was a random zombie extra in Night of the Living Dead.
It could have happened.
Could have happened, but not likely.
But as it happened, that's the truth.
I think Lonesome Dove was a little bit after Night of the Living Dead, though.
Significantly after. That was the point.
Gunsmoke wasn't that long after.
It was about 10 to 15 years after.
Yeah.
And
with Lonesome
Night of the Living Dead was at the tail end of the black and white era. Lonesome Dove was late 80s, early 90s. Except for some of the later ones, which were late 90s, maybe even early 2000s. But still.
It was a long.
If you don't know what we're talking about, Westerns. They used to exist. They used to be popular.
Now most people just think of Clint Eastwood.
They're the only genre of movie that always makes a profit.
Not always.
Name one that didn't.
Oh, I've actually got I actually looked it up, so I had a couple. I'm blanking on it now, though.
Even Blazing Saddles made money.
Blazing Saddles is considered a cult classic. People loved that movie.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it. I don't remember it. Guess it's forgettable.
I actually looked it up at one point, but I can't. I'd have to re-look up westerns that didn't make money. There were a few of them.
Another one that is very tongue-in-cheek was The Villain.
On a side note, have you seen the new Magnificent Seven?
Part of it, not all.
Talking about the series?
No, I'm talking about the movie.
The remake.
No, I haven't seen it.
I've seen part of it. I saw the tail end.
It was weird. I feel like it was very Hollywood. Very Hollywood. By which I mean it was rife with tokenism. They tried to get some representative of every group in there for some reason. But the actors they chose did a good job. I was very satisfied with the movie as a whole, even if I wasn't satisfied with all of the individual decisions. And the lead actor, I think, did the best job by a lot. I'll have to look up his name. Let's see.
Was he bald?
No, he was black.
I don't care about that.
You can be black and bald.
Yeah, but he wasn't bald.
They just lost it there. He needs to be bald.
He had a great mustache, though.
I mean, even in the Seven Samurai, the main samurai was bald.
Yeah, he shaves his head at the beginning of the movie.
It's Denzel Washington.
Well, Denzel Washington he's had a very accomplished career.
He was...
But like I say, the color doesn't matter, but you need to you got to have the characterization right.
Well, yeah, but he was not bald. I said that he was black because I was hoping that you guys could help me narrow it down so I wouldn't have to necessarily Google the name, but I had to Google it anyway. It was Denzel Washington. There he goes.
Does that mean I'm next?
Considering last time, it's possible. Regardless, though, I was very satisfied with his performance. And the performance of most of the people in that movie. I think Chris Pratt was the number 2 in that one. The so-called apprentice that took over, if you will.
So it had some pretty big name stars in it.
Oh, it was definitely big name. It was a 2016-2017 movie. But it wasn't. It was good. It was good.
So,
granted, I'm biased toward westerns in the first place.
Okay, y'all are talking over each other, so let's try this one more time.
So if you like western, feel free to tell us what your favorite one is down below.
And we will be sure to tell you why you're wrong.
We have our various opinions. We've watched a lot of western.
Oh yeah, a whole lot of westerns.
Feel free to hit the like and subscribe button while you're at it, or hit the dislike button if you really just dislike this video. We don't really care, it feeds the algorithm either way. Also remember to share this video with your friends and ring the bell so you can get any notifications.
He's going right for the closing spiel.
Till then, see you next time.
Bye.